Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Charles Green and I'm going to be your host today. Firstly, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar where we're going to be doing a deep dive into some of the key front-end UI technologies that you organizations are using today. This webinar is particularly targeted at front-end developers who want to know more about these technologies, how best to use them, and understand some of the latest trends around them as well. But before we get started, just very briefly about who we are at Directives. We're one of the fastest growing software development companies in Latin America, and we work with a large number of organizations in the US. But we're actually a bit of a different type of outsourcing company in that we provide what we call innovation services on demand to help companies really create great digital products and experiences for their customers. And we have delivery centers in Argentina, Peru, and Colombia. But without further ado, to help us understand the top UI technologies, I'm delighted to be joined by a couple of our experts today, Javier Vargas and Matias Bello. Javier, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yes. Hi, my name is Javier Vargas. I'm being front-end developers in Directives for 6 years. And also I got a UX certified in normal analysis group 2 years ago.
Excellent, thank you. And Matias?
Hello, everyone. This is Matias. I'm a full-stack developer on Microsoft technologies. I'm more focused on front-end work. I have 9 years experience now, and I've been working as well as a speaker in a few JavaScript internal trainings at Directives. That's it.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Now, just very briefly before we get started, I just want to remind everyone on the line today that we want to make this open for discussion, so please feel free to ask us your questions, and you can ask us a question in one of two ways. Either you can ask us a question using the chat box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or you can follow along on Twitter. We'll be live tweeting throughout the presentation today using the hashtag UITech, and you can use this hashtag as well to ask us questions. But without any further ado, I want to hand it over now to Javier and Matias to start the presentation.
Thank you. In this session, we will cover the following topics. We will start with CSS preprocessor, specifically talking about SASS, and then Matias will talk about Angular 4 and new features, and finally, he will show us a ReactJS implementation. First of all, CSS preprocessor. We are seeing some features, some tips to improve the CSS, classic CSS, how to structure a project. Also, we will be seeing a comparative with SASS and another preprocessor like less and stylus. First of all, what is SASS? SASS is a CSS preprocessor. It means it is a scripting language that extends CSS and decompiler in the regular syntax. It means it's like CSS with superpower when you can find nesting variable function that we will discover in front. And also you will find two extensions, that's SASS or that's SCSS. The only difference is SASS install sheets uses curly braces to separate rules. But we can see how it is converted. All the extension will be converted to a regular CSS. To the right, you will see some sort of web page is SASSmeister that you can try some code for SASS, and then it will be converted to CSS, and then you can try with some elements in HTML. It's very easy to use. Well, we'll list some of the basic main features. And then we will start with variables that is used to store information. The main advantages of this is that you can reuse some values. You can store like colors, fonts, weights, and then if you need in the future to change something, it will be located in one place, so it will convert to compile and CSS across your sites. Next feature that is nesting. As you can see, with nesting in SASS, you will see a similar hierarchy that the HTML elements has, and then it's very easy to locate some classes and selectors and update them. Here is the sample. You have an elements, and you will see how similar it is with the HTML elements and how you can apply different styling. Important is using in SASS to split your CSS in a smaller portion. You can create a file and then name it as extension with CSS, and then you can locate their variable, mixing, or any component. So then you can, using the keyword imports, will be helpful to reuse that information and apply that the other files that you have. A mixing for me is the most useful feature in SASS because you can create a group of CSS declaration and then you can reuse. How this works, you declare a mixing, you call, in this case, program radius, and then you can send parameters. And then using the keyword include, you can call that mixing, sending parameters, and that will convert the CSS with all that CSS declaration group. Now we can see a sample, we can call a dimension that will have received 2 parameters, and then you can also set up default values. And in this case, you can reuse that mixing in several classes. Now another mixing that's very useful, and you can find a lot of samples, is the media query. You can define a range of screen width, and then you can reuse that, calling that define mixing. So you have one place, then you define that sizes, and then you can reuse it. This is very useful as well because extend and SASS, you can create base class, and you can extend or inherit that properties and only change the property that you need. In this case, we have our base class called message, and then you only update code. So it keep your code track. Functions is very similar to mixins. That's the only difference is the output. In this case, it will return a single value. And this value will be any kind of SASS data types. It could be numbers, strings, colors, booleans, or lists. You will find a list of functions. Here you have some sample about how to manipulate color functions, some string functions, some numbers are very useful. And if you have to do that in the regular CSS, it's very hard. Here is a sample. You call the function with a number of parameters, and then it will return one value, and then that calculation will be placed in the property. Also, you have the ability to add some control directive, some operator, some conditional like if and else, and then create or return something there in a function and combine with mixin. Also, you will find a loop. In this case, SASS has more implementation, is better than other preprocessors. In this case, you will iterate 5 times, and then we create and using that variable to create several classes in one line. And next, we will see a simple basic structure. It depends on your project. In this case, we split it in 3 folders. First of all, we use this base to locate colors, variables, and typography. In this case, you can, as I mentioned before, you can use the keyword imports to use it. Also, you have a component, then you can there create styling for different elements. And finally, you have created one file, then and in that file you will be imported all that you need. In this case, if you have different themes, you can create different main files for CSS. Okay. We will see a little comparison about SASS and another preprocessor. In general, all the features are supported like in less or stylus. They support variable nesting, maybe a different way to implement loops or math. But in general, you have to pick one that's your starting, or maybe is something depending on your preferences, but most of them support these behaviors. Here we can see a comparative. In general, all less and style support syntax and variables. They'll be different. For instance, in less, don't allow to omit curly brace. But on the other hand, it allows variable hosting. You can use some variable that can have been declared after that. In this slide, you will see that are pretty similar, and maybe the only different implementation for operators, but in general, as I mentioned, you can do the same. Okay, that's bringing me to the end of my section. And the question is why you should use a CSS processor. For me, I guess it will save you time because you will produce cleaner code with usable pieces. It will be easier to the developer to start programming to coding in SASS because it is familiar with some operators. And also using import, you can structure and modularize your designs, and it will make your code easier to maintain. Okay, thank you for your attention. We will continue with Angular 4.
All right. Sorry. Well, I will talk very quick about the latest features of Angular 4, and then we will see some concepts about ReactJS. Let's start first with Angular 4. In the agenda, we have a semantic versioning number since Angular 2, which is worth mentioning here. We have new syntax in components. Standalone animation module, we will see this breaking change. Then we have TypeScript strict null checks compliancy. Since Angular 2, TypeScript is being used as a recommended JavaScript superset to be used to develop Angular. So some of the latest features of TypeScript will impact on the latest version of Angular. Then we have the Angular universal option by the team to leave in core. We have AOT. This is a help time compilation. We'll see an example. This also being introduced in Angular 2. Then we have a performance boost with flat and ECMAScript modules. And then we have an extra point is using Angular and Redux. If you don't know what Redux is, we will see pretty quick what it involves. And to give you a hint, this library base we use in React world, so we can use the advantage this brings us to the Angular world as well. Well, let's start with the semantic versioning number. When Angular 2 got published, the team also decided to use semantic versioning for further versions, following major.minor.5 schema. Major is increased when there is an incompatible change to the API. Minor is increased when additional information is provided, functionality, and but the existing functions and the API are kept stable. And patch is increased when there are some bugs being fixed. So what this tells us now is that version 2 and 4 are not compatible. So we'll see some of the breaking changes. First, let's see some of the tools that have been introduced on Angular 4. There are many. This, for me, one of the most useful because it saves us some logic on templates. Now we have the else clause in the ngIf directive. So in previous version of Angular, we had to have two ngIfs, one for the true of the condition and one for false. And we have to keep in mind all the time that we have to update the code update that logic in the template that doesn't belong to the template logic to keep all the application working as expected. Now we have the else part and the ngIf, so we have the logic in just one place. And if we can see in the real world example, we define a template and we assign an ID to that template using the hash, so this hidden ID. And then we use the ngIf directive. If when this is going to be evaluated, in the controller we can set this to true or false. It should be a boolean or any true value for JavaScript. And if it's evaluated in true, it will display this text. Else will replace the paragraph with the content of the template. So we are not going to be allowed to see the secret. Let's continue. This is one of the breaking changes. The Angular team have moved all the animation module to a separated module from the core to reduce the size, the footprint of the application in case you don't use the animations. This implies that if you want to use it, you have to install a separated module as any other module using npm or yarn if you are using yarn. Update all the components that are using it and add these classes from the new module.
Sorry to interrupt you there. This is Charles again. We have got a question coming in on the line here, saying that someone asking that they weren't aware of this, that this was possible. Are you able to share an example?
Yeah, sure. I do have an example of this. I found that most of the developer doesn't use the animation, and they are pretty handy. So we will see a quick example here I have prepared. As we can see in the example, we only do a menu that will slide in and out. And I will make this bigger so we can see it. This is an Angular 2 example. Keep in mind that if you are going to use this, we can see the component. All these should be added using the new module, but it's being used the same. In the component, we have a property called animations, in which we define an array of triggers. We put a name to the trigger of the animation, and then we have different states and what that state will trigger on the animation of the CSS. Then at the bottom, we have the transitions between the states and the duration and the type of animation that will execute. As you can see, it is very declarative. You don't have to know a lot of CSS, and it will reduce the amount of SASS or CSS you have on your application, making reasonable components and abstracting the logic here, the animation. One cool thing is that you can replace the transition when you go back and forth between them. You can do this, and it will work the same. Well, we don't come close now the menu, but it will do the same. So you can specify it like this. And to use it, we have to have on the div that is going to be applying the animation this tag, and we associate it to a menu state that will represent the state. And then we have the image base, this one calling a toggle menu that is setting the state to close or open, depending if it's already closed. And that's it. It's very declarative, and you have everything in the components. All right. Let's continue. So we have the standalone animation module. Then we have the TypeScript strict null check compliancy. This is a breaking change. Also, in my experience, this broke all the unit tests we already have on our application, because we mock the models by setting nulls or undefined values. In the case of the unit test, is not that data in the unit test is not needed. So when we run the test, all were failing, and this was the cause of them. So we had to update all the models and use the union type operator. So you define as a string a null or null in this case, sorry, number or undefined. And if you want to go, you can continue like this, array string or null or undefined, and that will fix all your unit tests, most of them. So that is something to keep in mind. Then the Angular universal adoption by the team to live in core. This was being developed by another team, and now is in the core as well. It's meant to render templates on server side. It should improve the loading times of your application. And now, when installing Angular, we have everything, almost everything ready to start using it. We have the only thing you need, and that's how I tested. I created a node application and started using Angular Universal there. And it do improve the loading times of the application. Next one is AOT ahead of time compilation. This is another feature we have since Angular 2 to improve the loading time of the applications. We can go through the flow so we can see how it improves the loading time. So in working with just-in-time compilation, we started the development of an Angular application with TypeScript. We compiled the application using TSC, that is the TypeScript compiler. We bundled, manify, and deploy the application. Once it gets deployed and the user goes to the page with a browser, it will download all the JavaScript assets. Angular will bootstrap the application, and then it goes through the just-in-time compilation process, the generation of JavaScript for each component in our application, and the binding of the templates, etc. So if we have some errors in our templates, let's say we have a typo in binding to the component, we'll see the error here at this time. So we need to go through all of this and get to this point to get the error. So if we don't have the error, the application gets rendered. Let's see how the flow is when using AFT. We developed the Angular application using TypeScript as well. we compile application using NGC, that is the Angular compiler, that will perform all the templates, the compilation of the templates with the Angular compiler, and generates usually TypeScript, and then the compilation of TypeScript code to JavaScript. And if we have some of the error we were talking in the previous slide, we will get the error here at compilation time. So it will say time. We have some services and plugins, for example, for Visual Studio Code, in which we see the curly line, thread line below the bindings. If we have a typo or we didn't define the variable of the component, so it's even faster. And if we get everything okay, the bundling minification and deployment happen. And then for the user, it just download the assets, Angular Bootstrap, and the application gets rendered. So we hope that everything went well. We can have another errors like in any other application, like 500 or 4, but we should handle that in our code. In any case, using AOT. So this is a big improvement in the rendering times and also in the footprint of the application, because all the module that is being downloaded by the users when the just-in-time compilation happens, it doesn't get downloaded because we did the compilation before. So we only download the modules needed to bootstrap the Angular application. All right, let's continue. Then we have some performance boost with flattened ECMAScript. A flattened script module is a bundle where only the public API is supported. This format should help tree shaking. We will see what tree shaking is. Speed up the build, translation, unloading in the browser in certain scenarios. So, what tree shaking is? Well, tree shaking is the ability to remove any code that we are not actually using in our application from the final bundle. It's one of the most effective techniques to reduce the footprint of an application. In the case of Angular, tree shaking walks the dependency graph top to bottom and checks out unused code like that lazy signature. That's something I learned from the Angular team blog. So it's pretty nice. Well, one of the latest from the Angular part is the usage of Redux and Angular. So in almost all of the Angular application, we'll see the double binding between the templates and the components, in which you can update the data in the component from the template and the other way around. And we also will see the usage of services to share data between the components. So when your application scales, it will start to get messy if you have many components updating the data that is stored in one service that you share among all of them. So to solve this, then I did my test, and right now we are using it in a productive environment in the project I'm working on. Using Redux, you solve this problem. It makes it easier to track the bugs because you are forced to go through just one direction of the flow. So we don't use double binding anymore. So you have the state of your application that defines the UI. The UI triggers action through the events in the page. The actions are being sent to the user, and the user updates the store that contains the state. The user are made from pure functions. We'll see this in the next slide, but you go always in this direction. Since we have just one store, there's another thing that Redux suggests and enforce. We know that any data change we have, it will be here and it will be triggered and updated from here, so we can track the data changes easily. So the main concepts of Redux are single source of truth. This means that you should have only one store and state, so you can trust in that source of information. Then the state is read-only. We use object of freeze to freeze the state and get JavaScript errors on running time. If somebody wants to change the state from the application, and all the changes are made with pure functions through the users. So every time you execute an action and it gets catched by a user, a new state is being sent to the application and it gets updated in all the components. To achieve this, we're using Angular Redux Store. That is the port and the bindings for Redux to be used with Angular. And this is really cool, and also is compatible with some tools that are being built, have been built to be used with Redux. So this tool will provide some cool features using Redux. One is to export the state and the import of it. So if you have a tester using this tool and find a bug, he or she can export the state, and you can import it and see what is going on in the application and see the bug happening in your computer. All right, that's all from the Angular part. Let's continue with React. That is the shortest part. We'll see a basic example and what is going on in the React world and why it's getting so famous. So this basic example of a component in React. As React is a library, we have to add in our index. So when you define a component, the only thing you have to import this ECMAScript thing 7. You have to transpile this code as well as with Angular, but then you have to import React from the React module. Then you have to import React DOM from the React DOM. We'll see why. Then we have a class definition that extends React component that will expect to have a render method on that class. This render method will return, in this case, JSX. That is a syntactic feature that the team developed that will be transpiled to JavaScript that will create these elements in the document, and this is how we bind data to the component. We can have more functions defined in the class, but in this is the minimum you need to render something. Then you call the render method of the render React object, and you pass the JSX of the class you define as component and the element in which you want to render this component. In this case, you will we will need to have an element with the ID container to have this render. And that's it. That are the basic building blocks of React. Then you start to compose using components, and that's how you get your application. So why is getting so popular? Well, we have some companies that are building some great tools around React. In this case, we have the Expo, a company that created some tools to develop in React Native. We will see that it's using the same engine to achieve a different result in this case. We can see an example of it. We have the page open was shown in the slide. You download an application from this company for iOS or Android. You scan the code, this QR code with your phone, and it's going to start showing the component that is defined here. It's a great playground to start developing in React Native. As you can see, the difference with the previous example of React is we import a text view and a style sheet from React Native, and we replace the JSX with these components, with these classes we had from React Native. But the rest is pretty much the same. Then you can drag and drop things here, and you will start seeing the code being executed on your phone directly. And if you edit this, it will be updated right away on your phone as well. So I think that's it from the red part. I hope you like it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's been a fascinating presentation. And as promised, and as mentioned, we have now some time for questions and answers. And as a reminder, if you want to ask us a question, you can do that either via Twitter using the hashtag UITech, or you can type in a question to the GoToMeeting on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Just whilst we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, we had a couple of questions during the presentation, which I want to start with. And the first one, guys, is it possible to combine Angular 4 with ReactJS? Does it make sense?
All right, yeah. It is possible. You can mix both. There are some techniques and some concepts to keep in mind when doing that. But I think it is not very recommendable because you have to know master both frameworks, Angular framework and JS library, and you start mixing concepts. So I recommend to go and use one or the other.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I see we have another question which has just come in. And that is, you spoke a bit about Angular 4 during the presentation, but obviously Angular 5 is coming out, or should be coming out next month. Do you have any expectations for Angular 5?
Yeah. First of all, you're going to have some rating changes as well, as we were seeing in the Angular 2 and 4. But the main concepts of Angular 2 and 4 will be the same. We'll have components and services. All of that is being defined, and we'll see some improvements on rendering times. That is something that React is still ahead of Angular, and some other cool features to help us with the development.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Let me just see if any more questions have come in. Just give me 1 second. Actually, I don't think we have any more questions at this time. So in which case, I'd like to bring the presentation to a close. Javier, Matthias, do you have any final comments you want to leave the audience with?
Sorry?
Do you have any final comments you want to leave the audience with?
No, not really, please.
No?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, sure. No worries. Well, firstly, I would like to say many thanks to everyone on the call today for joining this conversation. I hope it's been useful and valuable to you. I also want to say a very big thank you to Matthias and to Javier for sharing your expertise today. It's been great to get your insights and get your knowledge about many of these new technologies and how they're going to be impacting on our organizations going forward. With that, I would like to say thanks again for everyone for joining. A recording will be available within the next 24 hours, and you'll be able to find that on our website and also on our YouTube channel as well. And with that, I'd like to bring it to a close and wish everyone a very pleasant rest of the day.
Okay, bye. Thanks.
Bye.